Muito boa tarde e obrigada, Berta, pelo convite para estar aqui nesta apresentação conversa, porque acho que tem mais graça ouvirmos a autora a falar sobre o seu livro e sobre o que a inspirou do que estar eu aqui a dizer grandes coisas acerca do livro, mas uma coisa é certa e uma coisa eu tenho que dizer, eu gostei muito deste livro, Quando as Montanhas Cantam. Aliás, fiquei ainda com mais vontade de conhecer o Vietname e de provar a comida vietnamita, a tradicional. Fiquei com muita vontade de conhecer o país, conhecer melhor a cultura e conhecer a gastronomia. Este é um livro que nos leva por uma viagem incrível através da história turbulenta deste país, história do século XX, final da colonização francesa, a guerra do Vietname, os ataques dos americanos e depois a própria guerra civil que se instalou no país e que foi devastadora, e quem já sabe, e quem já leu o livro, sabe perfeitamente como isto afetou tanto as famílias e os vizinhos. É sempre assustador, porque uma guerra, e vamos também ter a oportunidade de falar sobre isso, uma guerra parece-nos que nunca tem vencedores, porque os efeitos são sempre tão devastadores, até mesmo do lado dos supostos vencedores, que se calhar, se fizermos um balanço, na verdade não há mesmo vencedores. Thank you so much, Nguyen Phan Qué Mai. Yesterday I was very worried, how do I spell your name? We had the opportunity to talk to the TV program, Todas as Palavras, da RTP3, and it was an amazing conversation, thank you. And also the talk of Qué Mai during the book 2.0, que terminou, who finished this morning, was amazing. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you again.
Thank you so much, Anna, for the conversation today. And hi, everyone. Hola. Thanks so much for joining me here today. It's my first time in Portugal, but I want to move here. The food is delicious. It's like the weather is so nice and the people are so friendly. I feel really welcomed here. I want to thank my publisher for doing such a great job. My publicist, Beta, who is here, she's amazing. My editor, Sarah, can you say hello? Wow. And, I have many of my supporters here. I have a gift from one of them, Isabel, who made the mini versions of the book. So wonderful. And her book club read the book and also gave me gifts as well. And so many of my champions are here. So thank you so much for being here. So I just want to say this is like more than a dream come true, because when I was little, I always wanted to be a writer. And, I was told I should not be a writer. So I quit that dream for so many years. So it looks like such a dream come true that I'm here today. Thank you so much. And I want to thank the bookstore for hosting the event today and for the great support that you give us, because I would not be here without booksellers who believe in my books and who have the books on the shelf. Thank you.
Well, we are going to talk about your path and especially your path in literature. We know that it took you a few years or a lot of years to write this book, and you decided to write this book in English. Why?
I always want to challenge myself, I think, I always wanted to do something different, and I only had the chance to learn English when I was in the 8th grade. And because I love Vietnamese poetry a lot, so there were a lot of years that I started translating poetry as a volunteer, because I wanted to invite international readers to Vietnam. And then I was looking for a novel to translate, and I couldn't find a novel that I wanted to spend years working on. So one day I thought, why don't I write this novel myself? So it started this crazy journey of writing The Mountain Sing, which took me 7 years to write. But I think also because in Vietnam there's strong censorship. So, any book which is published in Vietnam needs to have a license from a government-owned publishing house. So, so one of the toughest things for a lot of my writer friends to write, books about history is to obtain a permission to print the books. So many of my writers' friends in Vietnam told me their best books cannot be published. So like as a Vietnamese writer, you need to censor yourself because like writers are also can be arrested and put into prison. So I think I wanted to have this freedom to write and to create and not having to worry. So so when I mean, writing in English for me is really difficult because, Vietnamese is much easier for me. It's like when I want to express something, a complex thought or description is much easier in Vietnamese. But in a way, writing in English, gave me a big challenge and I learned and it's also a great way to, to bring my books to international audience. Imagine I wrote this book in Vietnamese, it would be impossible to find a translator who would translate it into Portuguese. But I'm really lucky that now this book is being translated into like more than 20 languages. So I'm lucky.
And it was a kind of a surprise, a shock to you, because this book is a huge success, especially outside, but also in Portugal is selling very well, and it's going to sell much more after the public Portuguese know you and read you. It was a shock for you, a surprise?
I wrote this book firstly for myself because, like growing up in Vietnam, I was really interested in the stories, of the elderly. They have experienced so much. As Vietnam experienced such a turbulent history. We were, colonized by the French, the Japanese, the Mongolian, and, we experienced this great hunger, and also the land reform, then the Vietnam War that killed so many people, and the fighting within Vietnamese among Vietnamese. So, there were just so many different things that people could not talk about openly. But, if you are curious, they could share with you, in private. And I thought, I did not want this history to be forgotten. I felt I had the duty to honor that history so it's not forgotten. So I wanted to write a book that enabled me to, understand where I came from, the experiences of my parents, why they behaved in certain ways, why they were so traumatized. So I wrote this book for myself. It was difficult for me to find an agent at first. And when I found a publisher, then things started. And I think as a writer, the best way to thank the readers is to work on the next book. I still feel like it's a dream, but I remind myself every day to deserve the love from the readers. I have to work harder on the next book. I have to deserve the readers' trust and their time. So so it has been such an amazing journey, and I can't tell you how many emails and how many personal stories I received from this book. There were several people who decided, several Vietnamese readers who decided to reconnect with their parents after reading the book, because the parents had some difficult experiences with them. So two of my readers did not talk to their parents for a long time, and after reading The Mountain Sing, they reflected on their parents' experiences and decided to reach out to their parents. So that was the greatest gift, like to encourage people to empathize and to consider other people's experiences.
Well, at the end, I think one of the conclusions that we can reach after we read the book is that nobody wins a war. even the winners, they don't really win the war because the effects, the impact is so devastating that the scars are going to last for decades, even centuries, I think. Still today, Vietnam is dealing with the effects of the Vietnam War. You're still suffering with the pollution and the weapons, the chemical weapons used during the war. This book is also an attempt to share the untold stories of Vietnam.
The very well-known poet, Vietnamese poet Nguyễn Duy wrote this. Nói cho cùng, trong mỗi cuộc chiến tranh, phe nào thắng thì nhân dân đều bại. In the end of each and every war, whoever wins, the people always lose. Every people who participated in a war, they if they don't get killed, they get traumatized. And it's like I wrote this book to call for humans to love humans more, because in the end we all children of Mother Earth. And I remember when I was around 6 years old, I was standing on my village road. I was looking at the bomb craters, at the people who lost their arms and legs or their family members. And I told myself as a little girl, the human race could not be so stupid as to wage another war. I really believed that as a child, And growing up, I knew I was too naive because there's so much money, so much power behind each war. So the politicians or those in power, they wanted to create war so that they can win power, or they could win some election, or they could show different things, or they could sell weapons. So it's really complicated. But, the impact of wars is terrible, and Vietnam is an example. Until today, millions of people are still, living with the impact of Agent Orange. Do you know that during the Vietnam War, so many thousand tons of Agent Orange was sprayed onto Vietnam? And the purpose was to make the leaves fall off trees, so it would be easy for the Americans to see, their enemy on the ground. But this chemical is really like a poison. It stays in the soil, in the water. Until today in Vietnam, if you go to orphanages, you still see, like deformed babies, deformed children from Agent Orange. So it has been proven that Agent Orange causes cancer, causes birth defects for generations. And until today, after 50 years of the war in Vietnam, there are still large areas that we cannot use because of Agent Orange. And also there are a lot of unexploded bombs as well. And there are people still dying in today, from these unexploded bombs. And, our nature have not recovered 50 years after the war. So, the consequences are devastating. And if, as in the mountain scene, in reality, there were so many people who fought against their family members during the war.
Exactly. And the neighbors and friends. The devastation is also in these inner circles of people who were so close. And then because of this, they just go apart. They went apart, and well, maybe in the end. And this is a hopeful book too. So and it's a book full of hope and resilience. Also, it shows the resilience, especially of the women. We don't talk a lot about the women's role during a war, and I think this book is bringing some justice to the women, to the mothers, to the sisters, to the daughters who are not, maybe they are not fighting actively, they are not in the camps fighting, shooting, but they are also developing an important role during a war. I think this is very a beautiful homage also to those women.
Yeah, I remember, when I was growing up, I saw, the women around me, the women who were the pillars of their families, the women who raised the children, and who were the pillars for the men as well. So I wanted to write about them. And you know, this book is also my fight against the Hollywood representation about Vietnam and Vietnamese women. Yeah. If you watch Hollywood movies about Vietnam, normally, you know, Vietnamese women are there for American men to rescue us, right? And, you know, I mean, we are beyond that, you know. If you go to Vietnam, you see Vietnamese women are among, you know, the very successful business people. Our football team, the women's football team, do better than the men's team. We got qualified in the World Cup before the men's team, you know. So, and you know, a lot of streets are named after women in Vietnam, like Hai Ba Chung. They are the Queen sisters. So, you know, in the old times, in the ancient times, there were two sisters who rode on elephants and who led armies of men to defeat the Chinese invaders. So, you know, we have very strong women in our history. And I wanted to bring their spirit into this book.
This is also, if you allow me, a poetic book. Because it seems to us that everything in Vietnam has a meaning. For example, your name, Qué Mai, what does that mean? Because one thing we learn with this book is that every name has a meaning, right?
Yeah. So, you know, normally when the Vietnamese language is, you know, published as part of the English literature, we need to strip away the tonal mark. Yeah. So I want to show my appreciation to my publishers for respecting the Vietnamese language, because I was saying, you know, I don't want to be colonized. You know, I don't want to change my language to feed the eyes and ears of the Western readers to make it easy for you. I want it to be authentic. So, you know, if you my name on the book, can you say Qué Mai? Okay. So can you say this word Qué? Qué. So Qué is my main name. So it means cinnamon, which is an ingredient of the Vietnamese traditional medicine. So my parents wanted me to stay healthy. So they named me Cinnamon, you know. So my two brothers and I, we all have a name which is an ingredient of the Vietnamese traditional medicine. So my parents are very smart, right? So for us to stay healthy. But if you take away the tonal mark, my name would become Q-U-E. So it would be spelled, it would be pronounced que. Can you say que? Que. Que means a stick. So from cinnamon, I would become a stick. So that's why, you know, the tonal marks is really important. And I want to show you another example. So in the book, there is Mrs. Tu, the aunt of Grandma Diệu Lan. Can you say Tu? Tu? So her name is means refined beauty. Refined beauty. But if you remove the mark, it becomes Tu. Can you say Tu? Tu. Tu is to become a monk. To be a monk. So from refined beauty, she's a monk. So they are, you know, in the Vietnamese language, the tonal mark is really important. So this is her name. Tu. Can you say Tu? Tu? Okay, I'm going to give you a test after this. So be careful. So, but there are many different marks. So this one is a question mark, right? And it's pronounced Tu. Tu. Tu means a cabinet. So from refined beauty, she could become a cabinet. So these are all real words that I'm teaching you, and I'm testing you later, okay? This one has a dot. This one is Tu. Tu. Very good. Tu means together. This one has a Huyen. It is pronounced Tu. Tu. Very good. Tù means, you know what it means? It means prison. So all the meanings are very different. These are all real words. This one is tư. Tư. Tư is number 4. This one is tử. Tử. Tử is to die. See, it's so dangerous with Vietnamese language, yeah? This one is từ. Từ. Từ means to abandon. This one is tự. Tự. Tự means by one's self. So they are all very different.
And we thought Portuguese was difficult.
I'm sure it is.
But as I was saying, this is also a very poetic book, maybe because you started with poetry, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you wrote poems in your motorbike? How is that possible?
I said in my speech, it's the truth. So I always love poetry. You know, Vietnam is a nation of poets. So we listen to poetry on the public radio. So public radio always had poetry program, and we have a lot of lullabies in poetry. So I grew up listening to poetry. So I really read a lot of poems, and I lived for some years outside Vietnam. So in 2008, I returned to Vietnam and I worked in Hanoi. And every day I rode my motorbike. I had a Vespa. I rode for 40 minutes from home to work. And you know, riding motorbike is so great because you are a part of life.
I heard that the traffic in Vietnam, especially, I know is dangerous, but okay.
No, but because you can't ride really fast. So like you can see, you can smell the food, you can see the people, you can, you know, smell the flowers. And I became really lost, and I wrote poetry on my motorbike, which is something I don't advise you to do. It's really dangerous. I was like caught by the police many times who find me. But I started writing poetry on my motorbike, so some of my poems were published in those I wrote on my motorbike. So talking about my poetry, would you like to hear one of my poems today? Should I read it first in English or in Vietnamese? Okay. Oh, and then I expect you to understand everything.
Of course.
Because I gave you a lesson, right? So this poem. So I also have a book of poetry in Vietnamese and English, and this one was it's called the Secret of Hoa Sen, and it was published in the United States in 2004. So this poem is from my mom. Gian bếp của mẹ. Qua đôi mắt tuổi thơ tôi nhìn mẹ tôi tất tả trong gian bếp được dựng lên bằng rơm và bùn quánh. Mẹ nhấc đũa lên quấy nắng vào nồi cơm đang sôi. Vạt áo mẹ đẫm hương thơm của mùa gặt mới tay. Mẹ mớm rơm khô cho ngọn lửa đói bập bùng. Tôi muốn đến cạnh bên và giúp mẹ, nhưng đứa trẻ trong tôi kéo tôi chui vào góc bếp tối thẳm. Từ nơi đó tôi nhìn gương mặt mẹ cách bừng dậy cho vẻ đẹp, cách bừng lên trong gian khổ, và cách hát cho cơm sôi bằng đôi tay rám nắng của người. Ngày hôm đó trong gian bếp của tuổi thơ tôi, sự hoàn hảo được sắp đặt bằng những chiếc nồi đen tuyền bồ hong, và bởi chiếc lưng khom của mẹ mỏng manh trông chênh sẽ biến mất nếu tôi khóc hay kêu lên. My mother's rice Through the eyes of my childhood, I watched my mother, who labored in a kitchen built from straw and mud. She lifted a pair of chopsticks and twirled sunlight into a pot of boiling rice. The perfume of a new harvest soaked her worn shirt as she bent and fed rice straws to the hungry flames. I wanted to come and help, but the child in me pushed myself into a dark corner where I could watch my mother's face, teach beauty how to glow in hardship and how to sing the rice to cook with her sun-baked hands. That day in our kitchen, I saw how perfection was arranged by soot-blackened pans and pots and by the bent back of my mother. So thin she would disappear if I wept or cried out. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I wrote hundreds of poems, and there was some period of time that if a day I did not work on a poem, I felt I hadn't done anything. Poetry was such a big part of my life, and now writing fiction has become a part of my life. If in a day if I don't write, I feel I haven't done anything. So like even though I'm on a book tour now in Portugal, I'm still working on my next book, and it's like so amazing to put poetry into prose. You know why I wrote novels? To cheat my readers into reading my poetry. So like sometimes if I can like make some poetry into the book, I'm like, yes, this is good. Because for me, like I wanted to bring the Vietnamese storytelling traditions into my writing. I don't want to write like the English way. I want to infuse the Vietnamese culture, Vietnamese language, Vietnamese poetry into this book.
And you thought about quitting your dream of becoming a writer?
Yes. There were so many years that I thought I was crazy. I had a full-time job. I was earning quite well. I was a consultant for UN agency. Imagine I was working in the areas to fight against human trafficking, child labor, doing really like important job as well. And then one day I thought, no, I wanted to pursue this writing dream. So I quit everything. And I had no income at all. So for years I stayed at home and I was working on this book. And, and because I had published 8 books in Vietnamese before. So my Vietnamese publishers always asked me, where's your next book? And I'm like, I didn't tell them that I was writing something in English because it was so crazy. But it took me so many years and I could not find an agent. So I thought, I was crazy. But it was the characters in the novels that kept me going. They would wake me up at night, and my husband told me, this book is going to kill you. Like in the years that I wrote The Mountain Sing, he went to bed, I was at my writing desk. He woke up, I was at my writing desk because I could wake up so early because I dreamt about my characters. I heard them speaking with me. So, because it was the story that kept me going. But they did not let me quit even though I wanted to quit because it was so hard. And like with any other job, you do this job and you get paid, right? And for us writers, we may spend many years on a book and that book never get published. So that's very tough. Like writers in the UK or in the US, they can apply for fellowship. So they can, have a proposal. I don't know if there's something like that in Portugal.
Yes, but not in that scale.
Not
that
in that.
They have. And I'm talking about money. Okay, it's just small amounts of money.
Yeah.
And just little time. It's not the opportunity of developing something like this. It isn't.
Yes.
It
So like you have to learn how to trust yourself, and
You have to do both things at the
and
same
also
time.
like
You
have
have
some
to work and write.
and have some savings, or have this wild dream. But in Vietnam, we don't have any foundation or organization that can give such a fellowship. So yeah, so I was really lucky that my husband really supported me, and he said, don't worry, don't worry. Art is more important than food and water. You go and create art. I will take care of the family. So I could have those years to work on the book. Yeah.
Well, it's time now to invite the readers who are here with us to make some questions. It's your opportunity.
If you don't
Be
ask,
brave.
if you don't ask, I'm going to test your Vietnamese
God.
language.
Well, okay. They are going to bring you the microphone. You have there.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
I am Paola. I met you yesterday in the book. Yes. Oh, it was. I didn't know you. I'm sorry. Before I didn't read the book, but I just want to ask you a question. If when you start writing, you have a clear idea of the book, or you just write and the history coming? How was the process?
Oh, hi, Paula. Paula, I met Paula yesterday, and I had a speech at the book 2. I was speaking about the power of books. And then Paula told me, in other countries, they are banning books, and we are here to talk about the powers of books. Isn't that amazing? And Paula, you're amazing. Thank you for being here. So, yeah, I mean, there are two types of writers. One type is that we don't, they are like, the first type don't plan so much, and I belong to the first type. I don't know the ending of both of my novels, so the endings totally shocked me. I had no idea. Actually, when I wrote this book, I wanted to do revenge. In real life, my own grandmother was killed in the Great Hunger of 1945, where 2 million Vietnamese died because of the Great Hunger under the French and the Japanese occupation of Vietnam. And my own grandmother was killed because she was so hungry, and my father and his sister were so hungry that my grandma ventured into a cornfield to steal corn to bring home for her children, and the guard of that cornfield caught her and tied her to the corn plant, and she could not break away, so she died. So I wrote this book to take revenge on him. With fiction, you can do terrible things to the people whom you dislike. So I thought I could do that to that man. But in the end, I found forgiveness instead. So that person is called Wicked Ghost in the mountain sing. So in the end, I found forgiveness instead. So that really surprised me. So I had no idea about the ending of my book. Yeah, so there is another type of writer who plans for everything. So they write faster, like I met a writer recently, and she actually, before she starts a book, she has everything mapped out, a chapter, what happens in each chapter. And for me, I want to discover, I want to be surprised, I want to be shocked. Sometimes I'm like, what happened? But, it makes each day, kind of exciting because I don't know what's going to happen. So it's kind of fun.
Another question? Okay, we have two.
Thank you. You're such a great audience.
Hi.
Hi.
Are all your books inspired by your story and your family stories in Vietnam?
Thank you. This book was inspired by my wish to have a grandma. So both of my grandmas had died before I was born. So as a child, I was really jealous of friends who had grandmothers. I used to go to their homes to listen to their grandmas, and I told myself, one day, if I could write, I would write a novel with a grandmother in it, so I would have a grandmother. So a lot of readers wrote to me and said, "I love your grandmother." I'm like, "I'm sorry, but she's not real." But in a way, she's real because, I imagine my grandmothers, and I interviewed hundreds of people for this book, and imagine, and kind of they became this grandmother Diệu Lan. So there are certain things for my family experiences or my own experiences that I fictionalized into this book. But this book is a lot of it is fiction. And my second novel, which is being translated into Portuguese by the same wonderful publisher, is totally fiction. So I don't have any real life experience in that. But that book is a result of my PhD research, and it also took me many years to write. So the second book is about mixed race children who were born into the Vietnam War, and they are the result of American soldiers and Vietnamese women, and they were, a lot of them were abused and abandoned. So they, no novel has been written about the Amerasians in Vietnam. So I was compelled to document their experiences in this book. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have
Thank
another
you.
question here.
Hi again. What can you tell us about the book that you are writing at the moment?
Thank you so much for being here. He's my great champion. He made a great video about my book on YouTube. Thank you. The third book is I think it's closest to my own experiences growing up. So I was born in North Vietnam. So when I was 6 years old, Vietnam was divided into North and South by the Vietnam War for more than 20 years. So I was born in the north of Vietnam. So when I was 6 years old, my parents moved us to South Vietnam. So I experienced a lot of the division among our own people. But this book is about my experience about Vietnam beyond the war. So it's set after the war. So unlike the first two novels, but this new novel is about book lovers and bookshops. So I love bookshops, but in Vietnam there are very few independent bookshops, because, for example, to import a book from other countries, you need an import license. Can you imagine? You cannot import any book legally and sell it in your bookshops. So any imported piece of literature needs to be approved by the Ministry of Culture if you want to have it, import officially. So that's why it's very difficult for the independent bookshops. And also there's a strong culture of book banning and censorship. So a lot of books are actually sold in the black market because they cannot be sold in the bookstores. So I'm writing about this black market of books. And I want to tell you this story because we have a well-known writer. Her name is Dương Thu Hương. She used to be a Communist Party member. She fought against the Americans, but after the war, she saw the corruption, and then she wrote about many corruption issues, and then she was house arrested, and then she was banned, so she could not publish her work, so she had to flee, and she's in France at the moment, and her book is banned in Vietnam. So one day I wanted to read it. So one day I knew, in Hanoi there is one street that sells all of these. There's you could find banned books there. So I went to a bookshop. So I asked the bookseller, "Do you have Dương Thu Hương novels?" So the bookseller told me no. So then after I paid for 3 books, and then he said, "Are you serious about buying her books?" I said, "Yes." "Okay, follow me." So then he took me to the back of the house, upstairs, 5 floors, to a very tiny room at the back of the house. There he gave me her books. Because at first, he suspected that I was a spy, so he did not want to sell to me. But after I had bought 3 books, then he knew I was a reader, a real reader, not a spy. So he sold me the books. So, you know, the black market of books is really interesting. It's unlike any country I have seen.
So you are writing about that, and you are not afraid, because when the book is published in Vietnam, I don't know if your publishers are able to get a permit, as you said, that they have to have.
You know,
to
that's why
publish.
I'm writing in English. But I mean, this book, I'm like, I love it so much because I want to talk about these things, and it's so interesting. It is so interesting. But how, you know, we have to navigate all these difficulties to kind of find the things we want to read. But it's, I know, I know, it's dangerous, but I don't know what I would do. You can ask me in a few years what happens to this book.
Okay.
But some stories need to be told.
Yes.
Some story needs to be told, and I mean, some stories, like, they demand my attention, you know. So at the moment, I feel I don't have any choice. But I don't know what will happen.
Another question?
So in that way, I wish I live in Portugal, right? Because there's no censorship, you know.
You can move here. You can.
You know, like, sometimes I'm really jealous of writers who live in certain countries because, you know, they can write about anything. Because this kind of fear, you know, for an artist, fear is the worst thing. It can really restrict your imagination, your creativity. So I want to be brave, but sometimes I wake up during the night, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yes, and especially these news from America of book bans in public libraries and school libraries. It's a little bit shocking.
Yeah.
Another question? Well, I don't think we have another question, but I have the last question. When I finished reading your book, I realized that maybe the book can be the best way to fight war. Do you agree?
Definitely, definitely. I think the weapons for war is, you know, to fight in a war, people always dehumanize the other side, so it's easy to kill them. I remember interviewing an American veteran, you know, and who said 60 years ago he went to Vietnam to fight in the war, and he was really worried about killing the Vietnamese. And then on the plane, his commander told him, don't worry about killing Vietnamese because they have been at war for generations, you know, for thousands of years against other nations. So, you know, life is cheap in Vietnam. You know, that's, you know, the American army really taught their soldiers that life was cheap in Vietnam. And I put the quote of General Westmoreland into my second book. This is a real American general who commanded U.S. troops in Vietnam. And they said, life is plentiful, life is cheap in the Orient. Can you imagine? So that's the attitude of a lot of American soldiers when they went to Vietnam. They thought life was cheap, so it was no problem, you know, killing people. But, you know, with literature, we humanize every side, you know. So that's why the weapons to fight against wars is literature, because we humanize every side.
Thank you so much, Qué Mai.
Thank you so much, Anna. Isn't she great?
No, it's easy when we have guests like Qué Mai, so it's very easy. Thank you so much. Thank you, muito obrigada. Resta-me desejar-vos bom fim de semana e já agora, e por que não, boas leituras.
Thank you so much.